He buried the truth for 10 years, but the truth didn't stay buried. It came back, wrapped in fire, soaked in blood, and whispering one name: his. Now the man who once walked away from war is about to start one. Damien Holt had been dead for a decade, at least that's what the world believed. His name was erased from every database, his face removed from every record, and his past buried beneath classified files that no one was supposed to open. But Damien wasn't dead. He was waiting, watching, preparing. The desert wind clawed at his jacket as he stepped out of the rusted Jeep, boots grinding against gravel. The safe house stood like a forgotten tomb, half swallowed by sand and silence. Inside, the air was stale, thick with memories that refused to die. Bullet holes still marked the walls, bloodstains had faded but not disappeared. He moved with purpose, each step echoing the weight of everything he'd lost. In the far corner beneath a loose tile, he found the box, metal, cold, untouched. Inside it lay the fragments of a life he had tried to forget, a gun, a flash drive, and a photo. 4 men, 1 mission, 1 survivor. His fingers trembled as he plugged the drive into a burner laptop. The screen flickered, files loaded, surveillance footage, names, coordinates, and 1 video. The voice that played was one he hadn't heard in 10 years, Marcus Vane, his former handler, the man who had sent him into the fire and walked away when everything burned. If you're seeing this, it means they failed to kill you. You were never supposed to come back, Holt. But if you do, don't trust anyone, not even me. Damien's jaw tightened, his eyes burned. He stared at the screen, at the face of the man who had betrayed him, and whispered, "You buried me alive, Marcus. Now I'm digging up everything you tried to hide." He drove through the night, reaching the outskirts of New York City by dawn. His destination was the Black Archive, a hidden server farm buried beneath a corporate tower. It held the agency's darkest secrets, and Damien's truth. He entered through a forgotten maintenance shaft, bypassing security with codes he wasn't supposed to remember. The walls hummed with electricity. The air was cold. He moved like a ghost, reaching the core. There it was, Project Silence, files, reports, redacted names, and 1 image. Marcus Vane, smiling, standing beside a senator, a ring on his finger, a symbol etched into it, a triangle with a line through it. Damien zoomed in, his breath caught, the same symbol from the mission, the same symbol from the betrayal. He needed answers, and he knew where to find them. At a rooftop bar in Manhattan, he met Elena Ward, a former analyst turned whistleblower. She handed him a folder, her eyes scanning the shadows around them. "They're watching you, Damien. They never stopped. And Marcus Vane? He's not just alive, he's running the whole thing now." Inside the folder were offshore accounts, blueprints, a list of names, and 1 word stamped across the top: erased. They erased you, Damien. Now you erased them. Damien looked out over the city. The lights below sparkled like stars, but he wasn't here to admire the view. He was here to burn it down. Back in his motel room, he stared at the photo from the safe house. 4 men, 1 mission, 1 survivor. He turned it over. A message was scrawled in faded ink. "You were never supposed to survive." He whispered the words again, this time with fire in his voice. "Then let them regret that mistake." He loaded his gun, packed the folder, burned the motel key. Outside, the rain began to fall. Damien Holt was no longer a ghost. He was a storm. The rain hadn't stopped since Damien arrived in New York City. It fell like a warning, soaking the streets, washing away the noise, but not the memories. He sat in a dimly lit apartment borrowed from a contact who owed him silence. The folder Elena had given him lay open on the table. Offshore accounts, blueprints, a list of names, and 1 photo that refused to let go. Marcus Vane. The man who buried him, the man who now stood beside senators and billionaires wearing the same ring Damien had seen in the mission that went wrong. A triangle with a line through it. A symbol that had haunted him for 10 years. It wasn't just a mark. It was a signature. And Damien knew exactly what it meant. It belonged to a covert faction inside the agency. A group that operated beyond oversight, beyond law, beyond morality. They called themselves the Quiet Order. Their job wasn't to protect the country. It was to control it. And Damien was their tool, until he became a threat. He stared at the ring in the photo, zoomed in until the pixels blurred. That symbol had been on the crate they were sent to retrieve. That symbol had been on the documents they were told to destroy. That symbol had been on the bullet that killed his team. And now, it was on Marcus Vane's hand. Damien's breath slowed. His pulse didn't. He reached for the burner phone, dialed a number he hadn't used in years. It rang twice. Then a voice answered. "You're supposed to be dead." "I was, but someone forgot to finish the job." The voice on the other end belonged to Reed Lawson, a former field tech who had vanished after the mission. Reed was the one who decrypted the files, the one who warned Damien not to trust the extraction team, the one who disappeared before the bullets started flying. "You told me not to come back." "I didn't come back. I woke up." There was silence, then a sigh. "What do you want?" "I want Marcus Vane." Reed laughed, bitter and broken. "You and half the ghosts in this city." "I'm not a ghost. I'm the storm they forgot to prepare for." Reed gave him an address, a warehouse in Brooklyn. "You'll find what you're looking for there, but be careful. The order doesn't leave loose ends." Damien hung up, packed the folder, loaded his weapon. The rain outside had turned to thunder. The city trembled beneath it. The warehouse was silent when he arrived. No guards, no cameras, just dust and shadows. He moved through the corridors, past crates marked with symbols, past files stamped with red ink, and then he found it. A room, locked, reinforced. Inside, a chair, a table, and a man. Marcus Vane. He was older now, grayer, but the smile hadn't changed. It was the same smile he gave when he gave the kill order, the same smile he wore when he told Damien the mission was clean. "You're early," Marcus said. "You're still breathing," Damien replied. Marcus leaned back. "You should have stayed dead. You should have made sure." Marcus stood. "You don't understand what you're walking into." "I understand enough," Damien said. "You killed my team, you buried the truth, and you wore the mark like a badge." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "You think this is about you?" Damien stepped forward. "It is now." The silence between them was thick, heavy. Then Marcus reached into his coat and tossed a file on the table. "Read it. Then decide if you still want revenge." Damien opened the file. Inside were photos, documents, names, and one revelation that shattered everything. His team hadn't been killed because of the mission. They were killed because one of them had betrayed the order. And that traitor was Damien. At least that's what the file claimed. Damien's hands trembled. His mind raced. Could it be true? Had he triggered the kill order without knowing it? Had Marcus buried him not out of malice, but out of necessity? No. It didn't matter. Even if the file was real, even if the betrayal was accidental, the blood was still on Marcus's hands. The silence was still his weapon, and Damien was still the man they tried to erase. He looked up. "You buried me, now I bury you." Marcus reached for his gun. Damien was faster. The shot echoed through the warehouse, swallowed by the storm outside. Marcus Vane fell. Damien stood over him, breathing hard, eyes burning. The man behind the ring was gone, but the order still lived, and Damien Holt had just declared war.
The warehouse still smelled of gunpowder. Marcus Vane's body lay cold on the concrete, his blood mixing with the rain that had begun to seep through the broken skylight. Damien Holt didn't flinch. He didn't mourn. He didn't hesitate. He simply stared at the man who had once controlled his fate and whispered, "You should have finished the job." But this wasn't victory. It was only the first move. Damien knew the quiet order wouldn't grieve Marcus. They'd replace him, reassign his secrets, erase his existence like they tried to erase Damien's. And if they hadn't already, they'd activate the contingency, the one designed for traitors who came back from the dead. He had less than 48 hours before they turned the hunt into a purge. He left the warehouse without looking back. The city outside was still asleep, unaware that a war had just begun beneath its surface. Damien drove through the night, his mind racing. He needed leverage, proof, something the order couldn't bury, and he knew exactly where to find it. There was a facility in Prague, off-grid, unlisted, known only to those who had once worn the mark. It was called the Echo Vault, a digital archive of every operation the Order had ever touched, missions, names, kill orders, and buried truths. Damien had been there once, years ago, before the betrayal, before the silence. He booked a flight under a name that hadn't existed since the war. No luggage, no trace. Just a burner phone and a gun tucked into a custom holster stitched into his coat. By the time he landed, the sky over Prague was bleeding orange. The city was beautiful, but Damien wasn't here for beauty. He was here for ghosts. The Echo Vault was hidden beneath an abandoned cathedral. The entrance was buried behind a wall of shattered stained glass. He moved through the ruins like a shadow, reaching the steel door that required a biometric scan. He placed his hand on the panel. It blinked red. Access denied. Of course, they'd erased him. But Damien had come prepared. He pulled out a chip Reed Lawson had given him, a stolen access key from a former operative who hadn't survived long enough to regret it. He inserted the chip. The panel blinked green. The door opened. Inside, the vault was cold, silent. Rows of servers blinked in the darkness. Screens flickered with encrypted files. Damien moved quickly, bypassing firewalls, decrypting layers of protection. And then he found it. Operation Ashfall. The mission that destroyed his team, the mission that buried him, the mission that was never supposed to exist. He opened the file, and what he saw made his blood run cold. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a setup. The mission had been designed to fail. His team had been marked for death before they even deployed. The objective wasn't recovery. It was elimination. And the reason? One of them had discovered the truth about the Quiet Order's real purpose. Not control, not protection, but manipulation. They weren't just rewriting missions, they were rewriting history. Damien scrolled through the documents, each one more damning than the last. Political assassinations disguised as accidents, economic collapses triggered by silent directives, wars started with forged intelligence, and at the center of it all, Marcus Vane's signature. But there was something else. A name. Elena Ward. She wasn't just a whistleblower. She had been part of the Order. Damien's breath caught. The folder she gave him, the intel, the warnings, it had all been real, but it had also been bait. He was being played. Again. He shut down the terminal, wiped the logs, and exited the vault. Outside, the wind had picked up. The cathedral groaned under its own weight. Damien stood beneath the broken glass, staring up at the sky. He had proof now, but he also had a new enemy. Elena hadn't just helped him, she had guided him. And now, he needed to know why. He returned to New York under a different alias. The city was louder now. Tense. The order had begun to move. Operatives were being activated, safe houses were being burned, and Damien's name was back on the kill list. He found Elena in a penthouse overlooking the river. She was waiting, calm, composed, dangerous. "You found the vault," she said. "You lied to me. I gave you what you needed. You gave me a target." Elena stood. "You think this is about revenge? It is now." She walked to the window. "You're not the only one they buried, Damien. You're just the one who came back with fire." Damien stepped closer. "Then tell me the truth." Elena turned. Her eyes were cold. Her voice was steel. "The truth is Marcus wasn't the architect. He was the pawn. The real architect is still out there, still pulling strings, still wearing the mark." Damien's pulse slowed. "Who?" he asked. Elena smiled. "You already know him." And with that, the lights in the penthouse went out. Damien reached for his gun, but the silence had already begun. The silence in the penthouse was suffocating. Damien Holt stood in the dark, his gun drawn, eyes locked on Elena Ward. She didn't flinch, she didn't move, she simply stared back, her expression unreadable, her voice calm. "You already know him," she had said. The words echoed in Damien's mind like a warning wrapped in poison. He didn't respond, he didn't lower his weapon. He waited, but Elena didn't speak again. She turned away, walked to the window, and stared out at the city below. Damien stepped forward. "If you're playing me, I'll end it here." Elena didn't turn. "If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have made it past Prague." He hated how calm she was, how calculated. But she was right. The Echo Vault had been a trap, and yet he walked out with the truth, or at least a piece of it. She finally turned. "There's someone you need to meet, someone who knows what the Order is planning next." He didn't trust her, but he needed answers, and right now she was the only thread left. They drove in silence through the city, weaving through alleys and forgotten streets, until they reached a warehouse near the docks. Elena led him inside, past crates and shadows, to a room lit by a single hanging bulb. A man sat at the table, tall, lean, eyes like ice. He didn't stand, didn't speak, just watched. "This is Kellen Rhodes. He used to be one of them," Elena said. Damien narrowed his eyes. "Used to be?" Kellen finally spoke. His voice was low, precise. "Until they sent me to kill a child." The room fell silent. Kellen stood, walked to the wall, and pulled down a map. Red pins marked cities, blue lines connected them. At the center, a symbol, the triangle with the line. They're activating sleeper cells, operatives who've been off-grid for years. They're cleaning house. Anyone who knows too much dies. Damien stepped closer. "And I'm on that list." Kellen nodded. "Top of it." Damien studied the map. One pin glowed brighter than the others. "Chicago." "What's there?" he asked. Kellen hesitated. "An operative. Code name Vesper." Elena spoke softly. "She doesn't miss." Damien turned. "Then I won't give her the chance."
He left the warehouse with a new target and a new urgency. Vesper wasn't just a killer. She was a ghost, a myth, the kind of operative whispered about in corridors and feared in silence. If the Order had sent her, it meant they weren't just trying to erase Damien. They were trying to end the war before it began. He arrived in Chicago under a storm. The city was loud, chaotic, perfect for hiding death. He checked into a motel under a false name, scanned the room for bugs, and set up surveillance. Vesper wouldn't come through the front door. She'd come through the cracks. Hours passed. Then a knock. Damien didn't move. He waited. The knock came again. Soft, rhythmic. He opened the door. Slowly. No one. Just a note taped to the frame. "You're late." Damien's blood chilled. He turned, scanned the hallway, but it was empty. He stepped back inside, locked the door, and checked the windows. Then he saw her.
Across the street, on the rooftop, a silhouette, a scope glinting in the rain. He dove. The bullet shattered the window, tore through the wall, missed him by inches. He rolled, grabbed his weapon, and fired back. The rooftop was empty. Vesper had vanished. Damien didn't sleep that night. He didn't blink. He waited. But she didn't return. The next morning, he found another note. "You're not the only one who wants the Order dead." It was signed with the symbol. Damien stared at it, heart pounding. Vesper wasn't just hunting him. She was testing him. And maybe, just maybe, she was the key to ending the Order. But first, he had to survive her. The city was louder now. Sirens screamed through the night. Headlights cut through the fog, and somewhere in the chaos, Damien Holt moved like a shadow. He hadn't slept in 2 days, not since Vesper's bullet shattered his motel window, not since the second note appeared, not since he realized he wasn't being hunted. He was being tested. She was close. He could feel it. Every alley, every rooftop, every reflection in a passing car felt like her eyes. Vesper wasn't just an assassin. She was a message, a warning, a reminder that the Quiet Order didn't miss. And if she hadn't killed him yet, it meant she was waiting for something. Damien didn't wait. He tracked her through encrypted chatter, burner phones, and whispers from old contacts who still owed him favors. The trail led to an abandoned train station on the edge of the city. It had been closed for years, swallowed by rust and silence. But tonight, it was alive. He entered through a broken gate, boots crunching against shattered glass. The air smelled of oil and rain. The platform was empty, but the shadows weren't. She stepped out slowly, black coat, black gloves, a rifle slung across her back. Her face was half covered, but her eyes were sharp, cold, calculated. "You're late," she said. I didn't respond. He raised his weapon, but she didn't flinch. "If I wanted you dead, you wouldn't have made it past the first note." He lowered the gun slightly. "Then why am I still breathing?" "Because you're not the enemy," she said. "Not yet." Damien stepped closer. "Then who is?" She reached into her coat and tossed a file onto the bench. It slid across the metal, stopping at his feet. He picked it up. Inside were photos, documents, surveillance logs, and one name: Kellen Rhodes. Damien's pulse spiked. Kellen had helped him, warned him, guided him, but the file told a different story. "He's not who you think," she said. "He was never out. He was reassigned." Damien scanned the pages. Missions, targets, payments, and one directive. Embed with Holt. Gain trust. Redirect. His hands trembled. His mind raced. Kellen had been playing him, feeding him just enough truth to keep him moving, but always in the wrong direction. He looked up. "Why are you telling me this?" Vesper stepped forward. "Because I was assigned to kill you, but I read your file. I saw what they did, and I don't kill ghosts who come back for justice." He stared at her. "Then what do you do?" She smiled, just barely. "I burn the ones who gave the orders." Damien nodded slowly. "Then we're on the same side." "Not yet, but maybe soon." She turned to leave, then paused. "There's a facility in Berlin. They call it the Silence Room. It's where they train the next generation. If you want to end this, that's where you start." He watched her disappear into the fog, her footsteps swallowed by the rain. He stood alone on the platform, the file still in his hands, the truth heavier than any weapon. Kellen Rhodes had betrayed him. The Order was building something new, and Vesper had just given him a target. He left the station without looking back. The city behind him roared, but Damien Holt was silent, because silence was now his weapon. Berlin was colder than he remembered. The wind cut through his coat like knives, and the city moved with a rhythm that felt too clean, too rehearsed. Damien Holt blended into the crowd, his face hidden beneath a scarf, his eyes scanning every reflection, every shadow. He wasn't here for the architecture. He was here for the ghosts. The Silence Room wasn't listed in any map. It didn't exist in any database, but it was real. Vesper gave him the coordinates, and now he stood across the street from a building that looked like a museum, tall, glass-fronted, pristine. But beneath it, buried in concrete and steel, was the facility where the Quiet Order trained its future. He waited until nightfall. He moved through the alley behind the building, bypassed the security grid with a stolen access code, and slipped through a maintenance hatch that hadn't been used in years. The air smelled of oil and rain. The platform was empty, but the shadows weren't. The storm stood alone. Damien waited until nightfall. A room with no handle, no window, just a scanner. He placed the stolen chip against the panel. It blinked, green. The door opened. Inside, the walls were lined with screens, footage played on loop, missions, executions, interrogations. Young operatives sat in silence, watching, absorbing. Their faces were blank, their eyes were hollow. Damien stepped forward, unnoticed. He scanned the room, searching for a terminal, a file, anything that could give him leverage. Then he saw it, a screen showing his face. Target Damien Holt. Status active threat. Directive erase. His blood chilled. They weren't just watching him. They were studying him. He turned to leave, but the door slammed shut. Lights flickered. A voice echoed through the room. "You shouldn't be here, Holt." He spun, gun raised. A figure stepped out from the shadows. Tall, dressed in black. A mask covered his face, but the voice was familiar. "You don't remember me, do you?" I narrowed my eyes. "Take off the mask." The figure did, and my world tilted. It was Jace Keller, one of the men from my original team, one of the 4, one of the dead. "You died in Ashfall," I said. Jace smiled, bitter. "No, I was recruited." I tightened my grip. "You were part of the Order?" "I am the Order," Jace said. "Marcus was a puppet. Elena was a test. Vesper was a distraction. But me, I'm the architect." I stepped forward. "You betrayed us." "I saved us," Jace replied. "You were weak, emotional. You wanted truth. We needed control." I raised my gun. "You killed our brothers." "They were liabilities." The silence between them was thick, heavy. Then Jace reached for a remote and pressed a button. The screens changed. Footage of Damien, every move, every contact, every kill. "You think you're fighting back? You're following a path we built for you." I fired. The bullet hit the wall. Jace was gone. The lights went out. Alarms bared.
Damien ran. He moved through the corridors, dodging guards, bypassing locks, reaching the surface just as the building began to shut down. Outside, the city was still asleep, but Damien wasn't. He had seen the truth. Jace Keller was alive, and he was the architect of everything. Damien didn't speak. He didn't breathe. He simply walked into the night, knowing that the war had just changed, because now it wasn't about revenge. It was about rewriting the ending. Paris was quiet in the early hours. The streets glistened with rain, the lamps flickered like dying stars, and Damien Holt moved through the alleys like a man chasing ghosts. He hadn't spoken since Berlin, not since Jace Kellum revealed himself, not since the silence room exposed the truth. And now he was chasing a name, one that had appeared in a classified file buried beneath layers of encryption. Dr. Lucien Moreau, a behavioral architect, a man who didn't pull triggers but designed the minds of those who did. The file claimed Moreau had overseen the psychological conditioning of operatives inside the Quiet Order, including Damien. He didn't remember Moreau, but the file said otherwise. The address led him to a crumbling townhouse near Montmartre. The windows were boarded, the door was chained, but Damien didn't knock. He broke the lock, stepped inside, and found dust, silence, and a room filled with books. And then a voice. "I wondered when you'd come." Damien turned. Dr. Lucien Moreau stood at the top of the stairs, older than the photo, thinner, but his eyes were sharp, calculating. "You remember me?" Moreau said. "No," Damien replied. "That's the point." Damien raised his weapon. "You worked for the Order." "I built the Order, not the structure, the minds." Damien stepped forward.
You conditioned me? Moreau nodded. You were one of the first, a prototype, a ghost with a conscience. Damien's grip tightened. You erased my memories? I shaped them to make you useful, to make you loyal. Damien's voice dropped. You failed. Moreau smiled. Did I? He walked to a desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a file. He tossed it to Damien. Inside were transcripts, therapy sessions, directives, and one note. Subject Holt shows signs of resistance. Recommend termination. Damien's breath slowed. You tried to kill me? I tried to protect the order. You were a threat. Damien stepped closer. And now? Moreau looked tired. Now, I'm just a man waiting for the storm. Damien didn't speak. He raised his weapon. Moreau didn't flinch. You won't find peace in revenge. Damien replied, I'm not looking for peace. I'm looking for silence. The shot was clean. Moreau fell. Damien stood over the body, heart steady, eyes cold. But something felt wrong. He searched the room, found a hidden compartment beneath the desk. Inside, a drive, labeled Project Revenant. He plugged it into his laptop, and what he saw changed everything. Project Revenant wasn't just about conditioning, it was about resurrection. The Order had been experimenting with memory implants, identity rewrites. They weren't just erasing operatives, they were creating them. And Damien Holt wasn't the first. He stared at the screen, at the list of names, at the dates. And then he saw it. Jace Keller. His death was real. His return was manufactured. His hands trembled. The Order hadn't just betrayed him. They had rebuilt his enemy. He shut the laptop, burned the file, and left the townhouse without looking back. Paris was still quiet, but Damien Holt was not, because now he knew the truth. The war wasn't about revenge. It was about identity. And the Order had just made it personal. Vienna was colder than expected. The city moved with elegance, its streets lined with history, its buildings whispering stories of empires long gone. But Damien Holt wasn't here for history. He was here for a name, one that had surfaced in the Project Revenant files, a name tied to the next phase of the Order's plan. Silas Drexler, a financier, a strategist, a man who didn't pull triggers but designed the minds of those who did. The file claimed Drexler had operated out of Vienna, using a shell corporation to funnel resources into the Order's resurrection program. If Damien wanted to stop the next wave of operatives, he had to stop Drexler. He arrived under a false identity, checked into a hotel that didn't ask questions, and began the hunt. Drexler's name was buried beneath layers of aliases, but Damien had learned to read between the lines. He followed the money. Offshore accounts, encrypted transfers, silent partners, and every trail led to one place: a vault beneath the Vienna Opera House. It wasn't listed, it wasn't guarded, but it was real. Damien moved through the underground tunnels, past forgotten chambers and sealed doors, until he reached a steel hatch marked with the symbol, the triangle with the line. He placed a stolen chip against the panel. It blinked. Green. The hatch opened. Inside, the vault was silent. Rows of servers hummed in the dark. Screens flickered with data. And at the center, a glass room. Silas Drexler stood inside, dressed in a tailored suit, sipping wine like the world wasn't burning around him. "You're early," Drexler said. Damien didn't respond. He stepped into the room, gun raised. Drexler smiled. "You think killing me will stop them?" "I think it'll slow them down," Damien replied. "You don't understand. The Order isn't a group. It's a system. You kill one piece, another replaces it." Damien stepped closer. "Then I'll break the system." Drexler laughed. "You already did. That's why they're rebuilding it." Damien's grip tightened. "With Project Revenant?" Drexler nodded. "With something better." He reached into his coat and tossed a file onto the table. Damien opened it. Inside were transcripts, blueprints, names, and one directive. Phase 2. Civilian integration. His breath caught. They weren't just rebuilding operatives. They were embedding them into society. Teachers, doctors, politicians. Damien looked up. "You're turning the world into a weapon." Drexler smiled. "We're turning it into silence." Damien fired. The bullet shattered the glass, but Drexler was gone. Alarms blared, doors slammed shut. Damien ran. He moved through the vault, dodging guards, bypassing locks, reaching the surface just as the building began to shut down. Outside, the city was still beautiful. But Damien Holt was not, because now he knew the future, and it was silent. He didn't speak, he didn't breathe. He simply walked into the night, knowing that the war had just escalated. Because now it wasn't just about revenge. It was about stopping a system designed to erase truth. And Damien Holt was the last man standing.
Istanbul was a city of layers, history stacked on top of secrets, beauty masking brutality. Damien Holt moved through the crowds like a shadow, his face hidden beneath a hood, his mind racing with the revelations from Vienna and Paris. The Order wasn't just rebuilding, it was evolving. And now he was chasing whispers of a network that operated beneath the city, a group known only as the Keepers. They weren't soldiers, they weren't assassins, they were archivists, curators of silence. Their job was to preserve the Order's legacy, to protect its secrets, and to ensure that no truth ever escaped. If Damien wanted to dismantle the system, he had to find them, and he had to burn everything they guarded. The trail led him to a forgotten cistern beneath the city, a maze of stone and water, lit only by flickering lanterns and the glow of encrypted terminals. He moved through the tunnels, past statues that watched without blinking, until he reached a chamber guarded by two men in black. They didn't speak. They didn't move. But they let him pass. Inside, the chamber was silent. A single desk, a single screen, and a woman. She was older, elegant. Her eyes were sharp. Her name was Sarah Al-Karim, and she had been part of the Order since before Damien was born. "You've come far," she said. "Not far enough," he replied. She gestured to the screen. "Everything you want is here. Every mission, every name, every lie." Damien stepped forward. "Then give it to me." Sarah didn't move. "There's a price." He narrowed his eyes. "What kind of price?" She turned the screen.
A photo appeared. A boy, 12 years old, dark hair, bright eyes. His name is Rami. He's one of ours, a prodigy, trained since birth. He's the future. Damien's voice dropped. You want me to kill a child? She said, I want you to end the order. And he is the order. Damien stared at the photo. The boy looked innocent, fragile. But the files said otherwise. Rami had already completed 3 silent missions, already erased 2 targets, already wore the mark. Damien's hands trembled. Sarah stepped closer. You've killed men, burned cities, buried truth. But this is the choice that defines you. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He simply stared at the photo, at the boy who represented everything he hated and everything he used to be. Then he turned. I don't kill children, he said. Sarah smiled. Then you'll never win. Damien walked out of the chamber, past the guards, into the tunnels. But he didn't leave empty-handed. He had copied the files, every name, every mission, every lie. Outside, the city roared. But Damien Holt was silent, because silence was no longer his weapon. It was his burden, and now he carried it alone. Stockholm was frozen in silence. Snow fell like ash, blanketing the streets in white, muffling the sounds of a city that had no idea it was being watched. Damien Holt moved through the cold like a phantom, his breath fogging the air, his eyes scanning every reflection. He had come for a name, one buried deep in the Order's psychological files. Dr. Astrid Nyberg, a neural architect, the woman behind the Order's memory manipulation protocols, the one who had designed Project Revenant's core, the system that rebuilt Jace Keller. If Damien wanted to understand how the Order rewrote minds, he had to find her, and he had to break her. She operated out of a private institute disguised as a trauma recovery center. Patients came in broken, left obedient. Damien entered as one of them, a fabricated identity, a fake diagnosis, a forged referral. The receptionist didn't question him. The walls were white, the halls were quiet, and the therapy rooms were soundproof. He was led to a chamber with no windows, just a chair, a screen, and a voice. "Welcome, Mr. Holt." He froze. The voice wasn't coming from the speaker. It was inside his head. He turned. Dr. Astrid Nyberg stood behind him, dressed in white, her eyes sharp, her smile clinical. "You've come far," she said. Damien didn't speak. She gestured to the screen. "Sit. Let's talk." He didn't move. She stepped closer. "You want answers. I have them, but you won't like them." He sat. The screen lit up. Images flashed, missions, faces, memories. Some familiar, some foreign. "You've been conditioned," Astrid said. "Not just once, multiple times. Every time you resisted, we rewrote." Damien's pulse spiked. "You're lying." She smiled. "Then tell me, what was your mother's name?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Astrid leaned in. "You don't remember because we took it." Damien's hands clenched. She continued, "You were our best subject, until you broke, until you started asking questions, until you became a liability." He stood up. "You erased me. No, we built you." He raised his weapon. She didn't flinch. "You kill me and you lose the map, the blueprint, the key to everything." Damien hesitated. Then he fired. The screen shattered. Astrid was gone, alarms blared, the room locked down. Damien ran. He moved through the institute, dodging guards, bypassing locks, reaching the exit just as the snow began to fall harder. Outside, the city was still frozen, but Damien wasn't. He had stolen a drive. Inside, the neural map of Project Revenant. Proof that the Order wasn't just rewriting minds, they were building soldiers from scratch. He didn't speak. He didn't breathe. He simply walked into the snow, knowing that the war had just shifted. Because now, it wasn't just about stopping killers. It was about saving identities. And Damien Holt was the last man who remembered.
Marrakesh pulsed with heat and secrets. The streets were alive with color, the air thick with spice and smoke. But Damien Holt saw none of it. He moved through the crowd like a ghost, his eyes locked on a name that had surfaced in the stolen neural map, Farid al-Masri, a former Order operative turned rogue, now rumored to be selling intel to the highest bidder. Damien had saved Farid once, pulled him out of a burning compound, carried him through gunfire, buried his identity so deep the Order couldn't find him. But now Farid was back, and he was selling pieces of the system Damien was trying to destroy. The meeting was set in an old riad on the edge of the city. No guards, no cameras, just silence. Damien entered through a side gate, passed through a courtyard filled with shadows, and found Farid waiting in a room lit by lanterns. "You look tired," Farid said. Damien didn't respond. Farid poured tea. "You came for the files?" "I came for the truth," Damien replied. Farid smiled. "Truth is expensive." Damien stepped forward. "You owe me." Farid's eyes darkened. "I owe you nothing. You saved my life. Then you disappeared, left me to rot while the Order hunted me. I buried your name. I gave you freedom." "You gave me silence," Farid snapped. "And now I'm selling noise." He tossed a drive onto the table. Damien picked it up. Inside were names, locations, targets, and one directive. Activate sleeper cells in North Africa. Phase 3 begins. Damien's pulse spiked. "You're helping them rebuild." "I'm helping myself," Farid said. "The Order pays well, and loyalty, that's just a word." Damien raised his weapon. "Then let me redefine it." Farid didn't flinch. "You won't shoot me." "Why not?" "Because you still believe in honor." Damien fired. The bullet shattered the lantern. Farid dove. The room exploded in chaos. Damien rolled, fired again, hit the wall. Farid escaped through the courtyard, through the alley, through the market, past stunned faces and shouting vendors. He tackled Farid near the edge of the Medina. They fought, fists, elbows, rage. Farid reached for a knife. Damien broke his wrist. Farid collapsed. Damien stood over him, breathing hard. "You sold the future," he said. Farid coughed. "And you're still chasing ghosts." Damien didn't speak. He took the drive, left Farid bleeding in the dust. Outside, the city roared, but Damien Holt was silent. Because silence was no longer a weapon, it was a warning. And Marrakesh had just heard it. Athens was a city of echoes. The ruins whispered stories of fallen empires, of gods and men who once ruled the world. But Damien Holt wasn't chasing mythology. He was chasing a signal, a faint transmission buried inside the neural map he stole in Stockholm. It pulsed from beneath the city, from a location that didn't exist on any satellite, any map, any record. The Order called it the Labyrinth.
It was a forgotten facility, buried beneath the foundations of a collapsed museum, sealed after a fire that was never reported. The signal was weak, encrypted, but Damien had cracked it. And now he stood at the edge of the ruins, staring down into the darkness. He descended through rubble and ash, past broken statues and scorched walls, until he reached a steel door marked with the symbol, the triangle with the line. It was rusted, but still alive. He placed a stolen chip against the panel. It blinked. Green. The door opened. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. The facility was dead, but the servers were still humming. He moved through the corridors, past shattered glass and flickering lights, until he reached the core. A chamber filled with pods. Each one held a person. Sleeping, wired, erased. He stepped closer. The faces were blank, peaceful, but the monitors told a different story. Each pod was part of Phase 4, the final stage of Project Revenant. Full identity overwrite, permanent loyalty, civilian deployment. Damien's breath caught. They weren't just building soldiers. They were building citizens. Teachers, doctors, journalists, leaders, all programmed, all loyal, all silent. He moved to the terminal, accessed the logs, and found a name, Elena Ward. She had been here. She had overseen the final phase, and then she had vanished. Damien's hands trembled. He opened her file. Inside were directives, notes, and one message. Holt is unstable. If he reaches Athens, activate Protocol 0. He didn't know what Protocol 0 was until the alarms blared. The pods began to open. The sleepers stirred. Damien ran. He moved through the facility, dodging shadows, bypassing locks, reaching the exit just as the first sleeper stepped into the hallway, eyes blank, movements precise, programmed to kill. Outside, the ruins groaned. The city above was still asleep, but beneath it, the order had awakened something new. Damien didn't speak. He didn't breathe. He simply walked into the night, knowing that the war had just reached its final phase. Because now it wasn't about revenge. It was about stopping a future that had already begun. And Damien Holt was running out of time.
Tokyo pulsed with neon and noise. The city never slept, never slowed, never stopped. But beneath the lights and the chaos, Damien Holt moved like a shadow. He had come for a name, one that had surfaced in the final layer of the Project Revenant archive. A name that wasn't just familiar, it was his own. Subject, Holt X. A clone, a copy, a sleeper built from Damien's stolen memories, trained to replace him, to erase him, to become him. The Order hadn't just tried to kill Damien. They had tried to overwrite him. And now Holt X was active, embedded in Tokyo, waiting. Damien tracked the signal to a high-rise in Shinjuku, a corporate tower with no listed tenants, no public records, no digital footprint. He entered through the underground garage, bypassed biometric locks with stolen codes, and reached the 47th floor. The hallway was silent. The lights flickered. And then he saw him. Standing at the end of the corridor. Same height, same build, same eyes. Holt X. Damien raised his weapon. Holt X didn't flinch. "You're late," he said. Damien stepped forward. "You're a mistake." "I'm the upgrade," Holt X replied. They moved at the same time. The fight was brutal, precise, every move mirrored, every strike anticipated. It was like fighting a memory, one that had been sharpened, perfected, weaponized. They crashed through glass, tumbled into a server room, tore through cables and steel. Damien bled. Holt X didn't. "You're slowing down," Holt X said. "I'm human," Damien replied. Holt X smiled. "That's your weakness." Damien grabbed a shard of glass, sliced through a conduit, triggered a surge. The servers exploded. Holt X staggered. Damien tackled him, pinned him, raised the shard. "You're not me," he said. "You're obsolete," Holt X whispered. Damien drove the shard into his chest. Holt X gasped, then smiled. "You think this ends with me?" Damien leaned in. "It ends with silence." Holt X collapsed. Damien stood over the body, breathing hard, heart pounding. He searched the server room, found a terminal, accessed the logs, and what he saw made his blood run cold. There were more. Holt X wasn't the only clone. There were 12, each one built from fragments of Damien's mind, each one deployed, each one loyal. He shut down the system, burned the logs, and left the tower without looking back. Outside, Tokyo roared. But Damien Holt was silent, because now he wasn't just fighting the order, he was fighting himself, and the war had just become personal. London was drowning in fog. The streets were slick with rain, the skyline blurred by smoke, and Damien Holt moved through it all like a man chasing the end of something he couldn't name. He had followed the trail from Tokyo to Marrakesh to Athens, and now it led here, to the city where the Order's final broadcast was set to begin. They called it the Reset, a global signal, a neural pulse, a silent rewriting of every sleeper operative embedded across the world. Once activated, they would forget their past, remember only their mission, and obey without question. Damien had seen the blueprint, he had read the code, and he knew the broadcast was coming from beneath the Thames, from a facility buried inside the old underground. He wasn't alone. Vesper had returned. She met him in a safe house near Camden, her coat soaked, her eyes sharper than ever. She didn't speak at first, just handed him a file. Inside, schematics, timelines, and one name. Elena Ward. She's the trigger. She's going to activate the reset. Damien's breath caught. She was helping us. She was helping herself, Vesper replied. She's the last loyalist, the one who never broke. Damien didn't want to believe it, but the file didn't lie. Elena had overseen Phase 4. She had built Holt X. She had designed the sleeper network, and now she was going to finish what Marcus Vane started. They moved through the tunnels beneath the city, past rusted tracks and forgotten stations, until they reached the facility. Guards patrolled the perimeter. Drones hovered in silence, but Damien and Vesper were ghosts. They slipped inside. The broadcast room was cold, metallic. A single console pulsed with light, and Elena stood beside it, her hand hovering over the activation key. "You're too late," she said. Damien stepped forward. "Don't do this." Elena turned. Her face was calm, her voice steady. "They built a world of silence. I'm just making sure it stays quiet.
"You were one of us," Damien said. "I was never one of you. I was the architect. You were the experiment." Vesper raised her weapon. Elena didn't flinch. "You shoot me, the signal goes live." Damien looked at the console, a dead man's switch. Her heartbeat was the key. He stepped closer. "Then let me finish it." Elena smiled. "You don't have the strength." Damien moved fast, too fast. The shot rang out. But it wasn't Elena who fell. It was Vesper. The bullet tore through her chest. She collapsed. Damien screamed. Elena stepped back, her hand still on the console. "You chose the wrong side." Damien fired. The bullet hit her shoulder. She staggered. The console blinked. Damien dove, ripped out the power core, shattered the switch. The signal died. Elena collapsed. Damien crawled to Vesper. She was bleeding fast. Her eyes met his. "You stopped it," she whispered. "I didn't want to lose you," I said. "You never had me," she smiled, "but you had the war." She died in his arms. Outside, London roared, but Damien Holt was silent, because silence had taken everything, and now there was only one name left. Jace Keller, the architect, the ghost, the final target, and Damien Holt was ready to finish it.
The sky over Zurich was steel. No sun, no warmth, just clouds that hung like judgment. Damien Holt stood at the edge of the lake, the wind clawing at his coat, the cold biting through his bones. He had come for one name, one ghost, one final reckoning. Jace Keller, the architect, the traitor, the man who had buried Damien's team, rewritten his memories, and built a system designed to erase truth. Every step of Damien's journey had led here. Every bullet, every betrayal, every silence. The coordinates pointed to a private estate carved into the mountainside. No guards, no drones, just silence. Damien entered through the forest, boots crunching against frost, heart steady, eyes burning. The house was glass and stone, elegant and cold. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and secrets. Jace was waiting. He stood by the fireplace, dressed in black, a glass of whiskey in his hand, a pistol on the table beside him. "You made it," he said. Damien didn't respond. Jace smiled. "You always were the persistent one." Damien stepped forward. "You built a system to erase people. I built a system to protect order. You were collateral. You killed my team. They were unstable. You rewrote my mind. You were dangerous." Damien's voice dropped. "You turned silence into a weapon." Jace raised his glass. "And you turned it into a war." They stared at each other, two men carved from the same fire, shaped by the same betrayal, standing on opposite sides of a truth neither could escape. Jace walked to the table, picked up the pistol, and tossed it to Damien. "One bullet," he said. "Make it count." Damien caught it, loaded it, raised it. But he didn't fire. Not yet. "You cloned me," he said. "I perfected you. You buried me. I resurrected you." Damien stepped closer. "You lost control." Jace's smile faded. "I never had it."
The silence between them was thick, heavy, final. Damien lowered the gun. "You don't deserve a bullet." Jace nodded. "Then what do I deserve?" Damien walked to the terminal on the wall, accessed the system, and triggered the purge. Every file, every sleeper, every clone, every lie, deleted. Jace's eyes widened. "You'll collapse everything." "I'll collapse you," Damien said. The system blinked, red, then black. Jace stepped forward, rage in his eyes. Damien raised the gun, fired. The bullet hit the glass behind him. Jace froze. Damien turned, walked to the door, paused. "You built silence. I buried it." Outside, the wind howled. The estate groaned, and Jace Keller stood alone in the ruins of his empire. Damien Holt didn't look back. He walked into the snow, the cold biting, the silence deafening. But this time, it wasn't a weapon. It was peace. Because the war was over, and Damien Holt had won.